The mockery. The emergency klaxons echoed through the massive corridors of Nexus Station, the Stellar Confederation's most important diplomatic facility. Located at the crossroads of three major galactic trade routes, the station had witnessed countless historic moments, but never anything quite like this. Representatives from 15 of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations had gathered in the Grand Assembly Hall, their varied forms creating a living testament to evolution's infinite creativity. Admiral Thexera of the Zephyrian Collective stood at the central podium, her crystalline form catching and refracting the chamber's ambient light into dancing rainbows across the walls. Her voice resonated with harmonic frequencies that made the very air shimmer with energy. "Fellow beings of the Confederation," she began, her tone carrying the weight of impending catastrophe. "Our long-range reconnaissance has confirmed our worst fears. The Xyrian Dominion has begun their expansion beyond the Void Barrier." A collective shudder ran through the assembled delegates. The Xyrian Dominion had been contained beyond the galaxy's edge for over 2 centuries, held back by an ancient energy barrier that had cost millions of lives to construct. Now that barrier was failing, and the most aggressive military force the galaxy had ever known was preparing to reclaim what they considered their rightful territory. General Korthful of the Thalassian Deep Fleets rose from his specially designed aquatic chamber, his tentacled form undulating with visible distress. His words bubbled through the translation matrix with urgent precision. "Our bioships have detected 17 Xyrian war moons crossing the barrier. Each vessel is capable of sterilizing entire star systems. Their technology has evolved during their exile. These are not the same enemies our ancestors defeated." Commander Zix 4471 of the Mechanoid Concordat processed this information through multiple data streams simultaneously, its optical sensors flickering with rapid calculations. Probability matrices indicate a 0.3% chance of successful defense using conventional strategies. The artificial being announced, its synthetic voice carrying no emotion despite the devastating implications. Xyrian adaptive warfare protocols have incorporated countermeasures for all known Confederation military doctrines. The chamber erupted into organized chaos as each civilization's representatives began presenting their military capabilities. The Pyrothian delegate's flame-wreathed form danced higher as he described fusion cannons capable of igniting gas giants. The insectoid Clixerian ambassador clicked her mandibles rhythmically while detailing swarm tactics that had conquered 12 sectors. Each species boasted of technologies that pushed the boundaries of physics itself. Through it all, Captain Elena Rodriguez sat quietly in the section reserved for humanity's delegation. At 42, she carried herself with the steady confidence of someone who had spent 20 years working in the deep void between stars. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her uniform bore the simple insignia of the United Earth Space Navy. Unlike the ornate ceremonial dress worn by other military representatives, her clothing was functional, designed for actual service rather than diplomatic display. Rodriguez had earned her position through merit rather than politics. She had commanded mining operations in asteroid fields where a single miscalculation meant death, led rescue missions in the lawless frontier zones where pirates preyed on civilian vessels, and somehow kept her crews alive through situations that should have been impossible to survive. Her hands bore the calluses of someone who still worked alongside her people, rather than simply commanding from a safe distance. The other delegates barely acknowledged the human presence. Humanity was a relatively recent addition to the Confederation, having achieved interstellar travel only 50 years earlier. Their technology was considered primitive by galactic standards, their military forces laughably small compared to the vast fleets maintained by older civilizations. Most species viewed humans as useful for manual labor and basic resource extraction, but hardly worthy of consideration in matters of galactic security. Admiral Thexera's attention finally turned toward the human section, her crystalline features shifting into patterns that suggested barely concealed condescension. "Captain Rodriguez," she said, her voice carrying just enough respect to avoid outright insult, "what does Earth contribute to our defensive preparations? Your species has remained notably quiet during these proceedings. Rodriguez stood slowly, her movements economical and precise. Every conversation in the vast chamber gradually ceased as attention focused on the lone human representative. She walked to the central display with unhurried steps, her expression calm despite the weight of countless alien eyes upon her. When she finally spoke, her voice was clear and steady, cutting through the ambient noise like a blade through silk. "Earth offers the UES Defiance," she said simply. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before the laughter began. It started with General Korthful's bubbling amusement, quickly joined by the melodic chiming of the ethereal collective's energy-based representatives. Even the normally dignified mechanoid delegates allowed their optical arrays to flicker in patterns indicating humor. The sound built into a wave of mirth that echoed off the chamber's walls. Admiral Thexera's crystalline form shifted through colors indicating barely controlled amusement. "Captain Rodriguez," she said, her harmonic voice carrying obvious disbelief, "are you perhaps referring to the converted cargo vessel currently docked at Bay 47? The ship that our sensors indicate is 3 decades past its recommended service life." Commander 64471's mechanical voice added its own assessment with clinical precision. "The vessel designated UES Defiance registers power output levels consistent with civilian transport rather than military engagement platforms. Its hull composition suggests adaptation from asteroid mining operations rather than purposeful military construction." The Clixerian ambassador's mandibles clicked in a pattern that the translation matrix rendered as derisive amusement. "Honored human, our courier vessels mount more impressive weaponry than your flagship. Perhaps your species would be better served by evacuation protocols rather than combat participation." Rodriguez waited patiently for the laughter to subside, her dark eyes never leaving the central holographic display where the approaching Xerian fleet continued its inexorable advance toward the galaxy's populated core. When quiet finally returned to the chamber, she spoke again with the same unshakable confidence. "I guarantee the Defiance will prove more effective than your combined fleets." The laughter stopped as if someone had activated a sound-dampening field. Every being in the chamber stared at this small human woman who had just claimed superiority over military forces that had defended the galaxy for millennia. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Admiral Thexera found her voice. "Captain, that assertion contradicts all available data. The mathematical impossibility alone suggests either fundamental misunderstanding of the tactical situation or deliberate deception." Rodriguez's lips curved into what might have been a smile, but her eyes remained as cold as the void between stars. "Neither, Admiral. Simply preparation." She manipulated the central display, replacing the Xerian fleet projection with detailed schematics of her ship. What appeared on the screen made several delegates lean forward with expressions ranging from confusion to professional curiosity. The UES Defiance looked exactly like what it claimed to be, an old converted mining vessel that had seen better decades. Its hull showed the scars of countless asteroid impacts, patches of mismatched metal where repairs had been made with whatever materials were available, and power conduits that seemed to follow no recognizable engineering principles. But Rodriguez's presentation revealed something else entirely. Hidden beneath the obvious modifications were systems that defied easy categorization. Power distribution networks that violated conventional engineering wisdom, sensor arrays designed for purposes the assembled scientists couldn't immediately identify, and storage compartments containing materials with properties that made the galaxy's finest minds mutter among themselves in confusion. "Your vessel appears to incorporate technologies not found in our databases," observed the ethereal collective's primary representative, her energy form flickering with intellectual curiosity. "These modifications should result in catastrophic system failures according to established physics." Rodriguez's smile grew slightly wider. "Conventional physics, yes, but we've had 20 years to learn new principles." She changed the display again, showing footage that made every being present lean forward with combinations of fascination and horror. The Defiance was shown approaching what appeared to be a Xerian scout vessel, one of the advanced reconnaissance units that had been probing the galaxy's defenses for the past months. What happened next challenged every assumption the Confederation had made about human capabilities. Instead of engaging at long range with energy weapons, the human ship closed to contact distance. Instead of attempting to disable the enemy vessel with precision strikes, the Defiance did something that made several delegates recoil in shock. It began to dismantle the scout ship piece by piece, while the vessel was still operational. The footage showed humans in modified environmental suits using what appeared to be industrial cutting tools to breach the Xerian hull. They moved like salvage crews rather than soldiers, working methodically to dissect the enemy vessel as it struggled to defend itself. Their tools looked crude compared to the elegant energy weapons favored by other species, but they were undeniably effective. 17 scout encounters over the past 5 years, Rodriguez said, her voice flat and professional as the footage continued. Each contact provided valuable intelligence about Xerian technology, tactics, and psychological profiles. General Korthful's translation matrix conveyed his horror with perfect clarity. Captain, your crew is dismantling active enemy vessels. This violates numerous conventions regarding civilized warfare. Rodriguez's expression didn't change. The Xerian don't recognize conventions, General. They respect only strength and results. Every scout ship we've analyzed has taught us more about their weaknesses. Commander Zix 4471 processed this information through multiple analytical frameworks simultaneously. Your methodology suggests unconventional tactical approaches that our combat simulations have not accounted for. This represents a significant variable in our defensive calculations. The chamber fell into contemplative silence as the implications sank in. These humans hadn't been quietly hiding in their corner of the galaxy. They had been actively hunting Xerian scouts, learning from each encounter, adapting their ship and tactics based on hard-won experience. While the great civilizations had debated and prepared with conventional military wisdom, humanity had been writing entirely new rules of engagement. Admiral Thexera's crystalline form shifted through patterns indicating deep consideration. Captain Rodriguez, your claims require verification. The Confederation cannot base its defense on unproven assertions, regardless of how compelling your presentation might be. Rodriguez nodded as if she had expected this response. Then let's arrange a demonstration. The Xerian patrol fleet approaching Sector 7 would provide an excellent test case. The suggestion sent ripples of shock through the assembled delegates. The patrol fleet in question consisted of 4 Xerian cruisers, each more than capable of destroying conventional Confederation warships. Sending a single vessel against such a force was considered tantamount to suicide. Captain, Admiral Thexera said carefully, that patrol represents a significant threat to civilian populations. We cannot risk allowing Xerian forces to advance further while conducting experimental tactics. Rodriguez's smile became predatory. Admiral, I'm not suggesting an experiment. I'm offering a demonstration of capabilities that will end this invasion before it properly begins. She gestured to the holographic display, where the approaching Xerian armada continued its advance toward the galaxy's core worlds. Give me 12 hours with that patrol fleet. If the Defiance fails to neutralize the threat, humanity will accept evacuation to the Outer Rim colonies. But if we succeed, the Confederation places human tactical doctrine at the center of your defensive strategy. The chamber erupted into urgent consultations as delegates conferred with their respective governments through quantum communication links. The stakes couldn't be higher. If the humans failed, the Confederation would lose both a patrol zone and their newest member species. But if Rodriguez was telling the truth about her ship's capabilities, everything they thought they knew about warfare was about to change. After 30 minutes of intense deliberation, Admiral Thexera called for order. Her crystalline form had shifted to colors indicating formal decision-making protocols. Captain Rodriguez, the Confederation accepts your proposal. You have 12 hours to demonstrate human military effectiveness against the Xerian patrol in Sector 7. Success will result in immediate integration of human tactical advisors into our command structure. Failure will trigger evacuation protocols for all human colonies. Rodriguez stood at attention, her expression revealing nothing of the enormous pressure she had just accepted. "Understood, Admiral. The Defiance will depart within the hour." As she walked toward the chamber's exit, conversations resumed throughout the assembly. Most delegates spoke in tones that suggested they expected to be discussing human evacuation procedures within half a day. But a few perceptive observers noticed something the majority had missed. Captain Elena Rodriguez walked like someone who had already won a battle that hadn't yet been fought. The next 12 hours would either establish humanity as a major player in galactic affairs or reduce them to refugees fleeing their former homes. But as Rodriguez made her way back to the Defiance, her crew was already preparing systems that no other species in the galaxy truly understood. 20 years of preparation were about to pay dividends that would shock everyone except the humans who had been counting on this moment since the day they first learned about the Xerian threat. The annihilation. The UES Defiance drifted silently through the asteroid field at the edge of Sector 7. Her running lights dimmed to barely perceptible glows. To any casual observer, she appeared to be exactly what her registration claimed: an aging cargo vessel conducting routine mineral surveys. Her hull bore the scars of decades in space, patches of mismatched metal, where countless repairs had been made with whatever materials were available, and sensor arrays that looked cobbled together from salvaged components. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back, as she studied the tactical display. 4 red dots marked the positions of the Xerian patrol fleet, their massive forms moving in perfect formation through the void. Each vessel was 3 times the size of the Defiance, bristling with weapons that could reduce entire cities to glass. According to every military manual in the Confederation database, engaging such a force with a single ship was suicide. "Enemy fleet has entered optimal engagement range, Captain," reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen from the tactical station. Her voice carried the steady calm of someone who had trained for this moment for years. "All 4 cruisers are maintaining standard patrol formation. They haven't detected our presence." Rodriguez nodded without taking her eyes off the display. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency at stations that looked nothing like standard military equipment. Instead of sleek control panels and holographic interfaces, the Defiance's command center resembled a mining operations nerve center. Bulky monitors displayed raw data feeds, manual controls allowed for precise adjustments under extreme conditions, and backup systems had backups of their own. "Chief Martinez, status on the special modifications?" Rodriguez asked. From the engineering station, Chief Petty Officer Luis Martinez grinned as he ran his hands over controls that would have baffled engineers from any other species. "All systems green, Captain. The boys in the engine room are practically vibrating with excitement. 20 years of work, and we finally get to show the galaxy what human ingenuity really looks like." The Defiance had indeed been a mining vessel originally, but that was like saying a butterfly had once been a caterpillar. Every system had been rebuilt, upgraded, or completely replaced over 2 decades of careful modification. The power plant that had once driven asteroid crushers now fed weapons that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. The sensors designed to locate valuable ore deposits have been repurposed to analyze enemy technology in real time. Most importantly, the mining ship's modular construction had been expanded into something entirely unique. "Confederation observers report ready for data transmission," announced Communications Officer Elena Vasquez. Throughout the galaxy, representatives from 15 civilizations watched through long-range sensors, expecting to witness humanity's final military action before their species flood to the outer rim colonies. Rodriguez allowed herself a small smile. "Then let's give them a show they'll never forget." "Chief Martinez, initiate Phase 1 modifications." The Defiance began to change. Hull plates that had appeared to be crude repairs suddenly shifted and reconfigured themselves, revealing hidden weapon ports and sensor arrays. The ship's bulky superstructure unfolded like a mechanical flower, extending additional modules that had been concealed within the original mining framework. In less than 60 seconds, the converted cargo vessel transformed into something that had never existed in any species military database. "Jesus Christ," whispered Lieutenant Chen, her professional composure cracking slightly despite years of training. "I've seen this transformation 100 times in simulation, but the real thing still gives me chills." The Syrian patrol fleet detected the energy surge immediately. Their formation tightened as they turned toward this unexpected threat, their massive hulls bristling with weapons that began charging for combat. Admiral Kexthor, commanding from the lead cruiser, studied the sensor readings with growing confusion. "What is that vessel?" he demanded, his synthesized voice carrying the harsh tones typical of his species. "It does not match any known Confederation military design." His tactical officer, a cybernetically enhanced warrior who had survived a dozen major battles, consulted the enemy identification database. "Unknown configuration, Admiral. The energy signatures suggest extensive modifications to a civilian platform. It appears to be improvised." Kexthor's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his kind. A single civilian vessel dares to challenge a Xyrian battle group. These Confederation species have grown desperate indeed. Destroy it quickly, then continue toward the core worlds. The lead cruiser's primary weapons array powered up, preparing to reduce the Defiance to expanding debris with a single salvo. But Rodriguez had not spent 20 years preparing to die in the opening moments of her demonstration. "Now, Chief," she said quietly. Martinez's fingers flew over his controls, activating systems that violated several fundamental principles of conventional engineering. The Defiance's power output suddenly spiked beyond anything the Xyrian sensors could properly measure. But instead of channeling that energy into conventional weapons, the human ship did something completely unexpected. It began jamming everything. Not just communications or targeting systems, but the basic environmental controls that kept Xyrian warriors alive in the vacuum of space. The electromagnetic pulse that erupted from the Defiance carried precisely calibrated frequencies designed to interfere with Xyrian neural implants, turning their technological advantages into weaknesses. 20 years of studying captured scout ships had taught Rodriguez's team exactly which systems to target. "What is happening?" Admiral Kexthor demanded as his bridge plunged into chaos. Half his control panels were displaying error messages while the other half had gone completely dark. "How are they penetrating our shielding?" His tactical officer was frantically trying to restore system functionality, but every repair attempt seemed to trigger additional failures. "Admiral, their jamming frequencies are specifically tuned to our technology. This suggests extensive prior knowledge of our systems." The Defiance pressed her attack, but not in any way the Xyrian forces expected. Instead of energy weapons or missile barrages, the human ship launched what appeared to be mining drones. The small devices swarmed toward the Xyrian cruisers like mechanical insects, attaching themselves to hull sections and beginning to cut through the enemy armor with industrial plasma torches. "They're using mining equipment against us," the tactical officer reported, his voice carrying disbelief that such crude tools could threaten advanced military vessels. "But the cutting patterns suggest knowledge of our structural weak points." Rodriguez watched the tactical display with satisfaction as her drones worked with mechanical precision. Each device had been programmed with detailed information about Xyrian hull construction, gathered from years of dismantling scout ships. They moved like surgeons, targeting power conduits, weapon systems, and life support infrastructure with devastating effectiveness. But the real surprise was yet to come. "Phase 2, Chief," Rodriguez ordered. The Defiance launched her second wave of attack drones, but these were different from the mining equipment. These devices moved with intelligent purpose, carrying specialized payloads toward the Xyrian vessels. As they reached their targets, they began releasing clouds of what appeared to be metallic dust. "Nanites," breathed Lieutenant Chen, watching the enemy ships begin to suffer cascading system failures. "We're actually using nanites in combat." The microscopic machines had been designed for asteroid processing, breaking down raw materials at the molecular level for easier transport and refinement. But Rodriguez's team had reprogrammed them for military applications. The nanites swarmed through Syrian hull breaches, attacking the exotic materials that made enemy technology so advanced. They turned shields into conductors, weapons into hazards, and life support systems into death traps. Admiral Kexthor watched his fleet disintegrate around him with growing horror. 3 of his cruisers were already dead in space, their crews struggling to survive as their ships literally dissolved from within. His own vessel was fighting a losing battle against invaders too small to target with conventional weapons. But the real surprise was yet to come. Phase 2, Chief, Rodriguez ordered. The Defiance launched her second wave of attack drones, but these were different from the mining equipment. These devices moved with intelligent purpose, carrying specialized payloads toward the Syrian vessels. As they reached their targets, they began releasing clouds of what appeared to be metallic dust. "Nanites," breathed Lieutenant Chen, watching the enemy ships begin to suffer cascading system failures. "We're actually using nanites in combat." The microscopic machines had been designed for asteroid processing, breaking down raw materials at the molecular level for easier transport and refinement. But Rodriguez's team had reprogrammed them for military applications. The nanites swarmed through Syrian hull breaches, attacking the exotic materials that made enemy technology so advanced. They turned shields into conductors, weapons into hazards, and life support systems into death traps. Admiral Kexthor watched his fleet disintegrate around him with growing horror. 3 of his cruisers were already dead in space, their crews struggling to survive as their ships literally dissolved from within. His own vessel was fighting a losing battle against invaders too small to target with conventional weapons. "Retreat," he ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. "Signal the fleet command. The Confederation has deployed weapons we cannot counter with current tactics." But Rodriguez wasn't finished with her demonstration. "Launch the boarding pods," she commanded. The Defiance's final surprise was perhaps the most shocking. Instead of allowing the surviving Syrian vessel to escape, the human ship launched what appeared to be modified cargo containers toward the enemy cruiser. Each pod contained a full squad of humans in environmental suits, armed with tools that looked like they belonged in a construction zone rather than on a battlefield. The human boarding parties moved through Syrian corridors with terrifying efficiency. They carried plasma cutters, fusion welders, and electromagnetic pulse generators. But their most effective weapon was something no other species possessed: the ability to adapt on the fly. While Syrian warriors followed rigid tactical protocols, the humans improvised solutions in real time, turning the enemy ship's own systems against itself. "This is impossible," Admiral Kexthor transmitted on all frequencies as human boarders systematically seized control of his vessel. "How can primitive beings defeat advanced military technology?" Rodriguez's voice came through the communication channel with icy clarity. "Because we don't fight fair, Admiral. We fight to win." Within 2 hours, the engagement was over. 4 Syrian cruisers had been neutralized without the Defiance suffering significant damage. But the real victory wasn't tactical, it was psychological. Rodriguez had proven that human ingenuity could overcome technological superiority through preparation, creativity, and sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Throughout the galaxy, Confederation observers struggled to process what they had witnessed. The humans hadn't won through superior firepower or advanced technology. They had won by understanding their enemy better than the enemy understood themselves, then using that knowledge to turn strength into weakness. Admiral Thexera's voice reached the Defiance bridge through quantum communication channels, her harmonic tones carrying a mixture of awe and respect that hadn't been present 12 hours earlier. "Captain Rodriguez, the Confederation formally requests human leadership of our defensive operations against the Syrian Dominion." Rodriguez studied the tactical display where 17 Syrian war moons continued their advance toward the galaxy's populated core. Her ship had proven its point, but the real war was just beginning. The enemy would adapt, develop countermeasures, and return with new tactics designed to overcome human innovation. "Understood, Admiral," she replied. "But we'll need more than one ship to stop 17 war moons. How quickly can the Confederation supply us with raw materials and manufacturing facilities?" "Whatever you require, Captain. Your species has earned the right to defend this galaxy on your own terms." Rodriguez's smile carried the satisfaction of a plan 20 years in the making finally coming to fruition. Around her, the crew of the Defiance began preparing for the larger battle ahead. They had proven that humans belonged among the galaxy's great powers, but they had also painted targets on every human world in known space. The Xerian Dominion would not make the mistake of underestimating humanity twice. But as Rodriguez looked around her bridge at the men and women who had just rewritten the rules of galactic warfare, she felt confident that human creativity would prove equal to whatever challenges lay ahead. After all, they had spent 20 years preparing for this moment. Now it was time to show the galaxy what humanity could accomplish when survival was on the line. The age of human dominance among the stars had begun, born from the wreckage of enemy ships and the stubborn refusal to accept defeat. And somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, the Xerian Dominion was learning a lesson that countless enemies throughout human history had discovered too late. Never underestimate a species that has turned survival into an art form.